Have you ever felt like you've been doing everything right, praying, working hard, staying faithful, and yet something still feels stuck? Like the blessings you read about in Scripture never fully reach your doorstep? You're not alone. For generations, believers have searched for the keys to unlock God's promises of abundance. We've been told to believe, to pray, to have faith. But what if, hidden within the ancient scrolls of biblical history, there was a specific prayer, a divine formula that connected directly to heaven's storehouse, a sacred code, forgotten by time, but never erased from eternity? Today, something extraordinary has surfaced. Buried beneath layers of history, lost in the ruins of ancient lands, a manuscript has been discovered, one that contains a lost prayer attributed to King Solomon himself. The same Solomon who ruled over the wealthiest kingdom in ancient history. The same Solomon who asked not for riches, but for wisdom, and received both in overflowing measure. The same Solomon who built the temple, wrote Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, and understood the mechanics of heaven like no other man ever has. But hidden deep within the legacy of this legendary king was a prayer, not a prayer taught in modern pulpits, not a prayer written in best-selling devotionals, but one preserved in sacred ink, carried through whispers of time and sealed away until now. And when scholars unearthed it, they found something that aligned perfectly with the principles of divine order, kingdom wealth, and spiritual alignment. This isn't a prosperity gimmick. It's not about manifesting money through empty mantras. It's about divine alignment with the creator of all wealth. Because the truth is, God doesn't just bless randomly. There are patterns, there are protocols. And Solomon knew them all. This prayer, according to ancient fragments, was a daily invocation, not of selfish desire, but of sacred responsibility. It acknowledged divine authority. It positioned the heart in humility. It activated the principles of sowing and reaping in both spiritual and material dimensions. And now, after centuries of silence, this prayer is about to be heard once more. You're not watching this by accident. There's a reason your spirit was drawn here. Because what's coming next could be the turning point you've been praying for. As we begin to uncover the words King Solomon spoke to access divine provision, wisdom, and favor, I want you to ask yourself, what would change in your life if you truly learned to pray like Solomon? What if the missing piece wasn't your faith, but your formula? Because faith, when aligned with God's divine blueprint, creates unstoppable results. And for the first time in centuries, that blueprint is about to be revealed. So stay with me, because what you're about to hear has the power to shift not just your financial reality, but your spiritual inheritance. But before we uncover this lost prayer, take a moment to subscribe. This channel exists to bring you biblical codes that have been hidden for centuries. And what's coming next may be even more powerful than what you're about to hear. King Solomon wasn't just the richest man in the Bible. He wasn't just a king who ruled with elegance and power. He was something far deeper, something modern society barely understands anymore. He was a divine strategist, a spiritual architect, a man who didn't rely on armies or politics to build his kingdom, but on a level of heavenly wisdom that came directly from the throne of God. This wisdom wasn't theoretical. It was functional. It produced gold. It created alliances. It brought clarity in the midst of chaos. And according to ancient sources, it was activated daily through a very specific kind of prayer. You see, in fragments of early Hebrew texts, some of which never made it into our modern canon, there are mentions of a daily invocation Solomon whispered before dawn, not just any prayer, but one composed in rhythm with the patterns of creation, a prayer that combined gratitude, divine names, sacred geometry, and alignment with God's order. And here's where it gets even deeper. Rabbinical traditions, often kept within tight scholarly circles, refer to this as heaven's formula for drawing earth's gold, a kind of spiritual protocol designed to position your mind, your words, and your atmosphere into full agreement with divine provision. It wasn't magic. It wasn't manipulation. It was alignment. Solomon understood that wealth, true spiritual wealth, did not start in the hands. It started in the spirit, in the hidden chambers of the soul, where man and God meet in sacred agreement. And it was from that invisible realm that the visible riches flowed. Now imagine for a moment what that means. What if Solomon's abundance wasn't just the result of his kingly status, but of a spiritual technology? a daily communion with heaven that aligned him with supernatural results. What if this wasn't about earthly inheritance at all, but about a sacred inheritance passed down through revelation? This changes everything. Because if Solomon's wisdom came from direct divine transmission, and if that transmission was accessed through prayer, then that prayer isn't just historical, it's prophetic, it's alive, and if it's been rediscovered, it could still carry the same power today. The modern world teaches us to hustle harder, grind longer, work without rest, but Solomon operated in something different. He moved in divine rhythm. His steps were ordered, his words intentional, and the foundation of it all was his prayer. A prayer not just for guidance, but for activation. A prayer that tuned his heart to the frequency of God's kingdom economy. And now that fragments of this prayer have been uncovered, now that the lost manuscript has reemerged, every detail matters, every word, every pause, every name invoked. Because when you study Solomon's story through the lens of divine access, you start to realize this wasn't just wealth, it was covenant. It was a relationship with heaven that bore fruit on earth. And the real question isn't why Solomon prospered. The real question is, what happens when you learn to pray like he did? The manuscript wasn't found in a cathedral or in the dusty shelves of some ancient library. It was uncovered beneath the dry sands of Israel near the ruins of Masada, a place soaked in history, sacrifice, and divine mystery. A team of biblical archeologists had been excavating the site, not expecting to find anything groundbreaking, but buried within layers of collapsed stone and forgotten scrolls was a fragment. A scroll sealed in a clay jar, partially decayed but still legible in places. The language? Aramaic. The content? A sequence of phrases, rhythmic, poetic, powerful. What they found wasn't a random collection of ancient thoughts. It was a structured invocation, a sacred prayer marked by repetitive motifs of light, honor, open gates, and divine provision. This was no ordinary text. Every line mirrored the spiritual language of kings, not requests for more gold or power, but declarations that aligned the soul with heaven's order. There were words invoking El Elyon, the Most High, phrases speaking of divine doors opening at appointed hours, affirmations of spiritual identity, kingship, and covenant purpose, and woven throughout it all, a posture of profound reverence and alignment. It became clear this was the prayer Solomon used to position himself before the throne of God, not to demand, but to synchronize, not to beg, but to activate. Because real biblical wealth doesn't begin with money, it begins with alignment to divine frequency. That's why this prayer doesn't sound like a request list. It's a spiritual activation protocol, and those who understand how to pray this way don't chase prosperity. They become a vessel for it. The deeper scholars looked, the more they found patterns, structural, prophetic patterns, that suggested this wasn't just poetry. It was a spiritual code. It's no coincidence that Solomon ruled in peace while surrounding kingdoms crumbled. No accident that his name became synonymous with wisdom and abundance. No surprise that people traveled thousands of miles to sit under his voice, because something deeper was guiding his reign. And this manuscript might be the key that explains it. Now stop and imagine this with me. What would happen in your life if you began to speak the same words Solomon spoke, not just as repetition, but with understanding? What if you aligned your spirit to the same rhythm he used before making decisions, receiving answers, and unlocking favor? That's not fantasy. That's what's possible when you rediscover divine technology lost to time, but still alive in heaven's memory. And right now, as you hear this, something in your spirit already knows it's true. This is why you're here. This is why you're still watching, because something ancient is being stirred in you. And if what you're hearing is already resonating deeply, I want you to do something simple, yet powerful. Comment below right now. I want to activate Solomon's codes. It's not just a comment, it's an agreement. And when we agree in faith, heaven takes notice. This also helps others find this revelation. It helps this truth reach those who've been praying in the dark, searching for a breakthrough, but not knowing what was missing. And as we go deeper into the next part, you'll begin to understand why these words, these ancient words, still hold the power to shift everything. Most people today are praying, but they're not accessing anything. They're speaking, but no power is being released. And it's not because God isn't listening. It's because the structure is broken. The order of the kingdom has been ignored, and the spiritual laws that govern results are being violated, often unintentionally. Prayer, as most practice it, has become a wish list, a monologue of need and desperation. But the ancient ones, the kings and prophets, they prayed differently. They didn't approach God like beggars. They approached him like sons of covenant, because they understood there's a sacred sequence, a divine code, that governs communication with heaven. Solomon's prayer followed this pattern with surgical precision. First, recognition of divine authority. He didn't start by talking about his problems. He started by magnifying the name of the Most High. He spoke names that shifted the atmosphere, invoked the glory, and silenced the noise of doubt. Then came the second movement, activation of identity. Solomon didn't just speak to God, he aligned himself with the identity God gave him. He called himself servant. He positioned his heart in humility, but he also activated the truth that he was a king ordained by heaven. There is power when your words reflect both your surrender and your authority. And finally, he released declarations, not wishes, not maybes, but words rooted in eternal law, statements that echoed heaven's will and brought it into earth's reality. Because words are not noise. Words are seeds, and what you speak into your atmosphere becomes the blueprint of your tomorrow. Many people today are sowing confusion with their mouths and wondering why the harvest looks like chaos. But the ones who align their speech with kingdom truth, they begin to see supernatural results. When Solomon spoke, things moved, not because of his voice, but because of the frequency he spoke on. He had aligned his internal world with heaven, and that alignment made his words irresistible in the spirit realm. We must understand this. The invisible world governs the visible one, and words, especially when spoken in the structure of sacred prayer, carry weight in both. You cannot speak defeat all day and expect to walk in victory. You cannot speak fear and live in abundance. You must discipline your tongue to obey the frequency of faith. That's what Solomon mastered. That's what his prayer preserved. And that's what you are now being invited to rediscover. You see, God's kingdom is built on agreement. When your words agree with his truth, realities shift. This isn't just ancient theology. This is spiritual architecture. And right now, as you've been listening, something inside you has already started to wake up. Not just belief, but memory. A memory of who you really are in the spirit, of what was spoken over you before you ever breathed your first breath. A royal identity, a kingdom destiny, a voice designed to create, declare, and deliver. And as we continue into what comes next, you'll begin to see how every syllable of Solomon's prayer was designed not just to reach heaven, but to pull heaven into earth. Solomon's prayer wasn't supposed to survive time. It was too powerful, too dangerous for the systems that thrive on silence. So it was buried, hidden beneath ruins and rituals, forgotten by design. But truth can't stay buried forever. What's divine always finds a way back. And now, the very words Solomon used to align his spirit with heaven, the phrases that shaped a kingdom, opened portals of provision, and attracted wisdom from the throne of God, have been discovered. They're no longer sealed behind religious tradition or locked away in sacred archives. They're here, now, in your hands, in your ears, in your spirit. You've just stepped into a realm most never dare to touch. Because this prayer was never just about prosperity. It was about positioning your soul in such a way that heaven recognizes you as a partner. And once heaven recognizes your alignment, earth has no choice but to respond. This is the mystery Solomon understood, the golden code of spiritual kingship, a formula not taught in churches, not preached in mainstream sermons, but whispered through generations of seekers, scribes, and sages. It begins in reverence. It flows through identity, and it manifests in dominion. And this isn't myth. You've seen the signs in your own life, moments where everything felt open, clear, aligned, and other times where confusion ruled and blessings felt blocked. The difference wasn't luck, it was spiritual position. Now you're beginning to see how everything is connected. The words you speak, the frequency you operate on, the honor you give, and the identity you accept. All of it either attracts or repels divine flow. And when Solomon prayed, he did all of that in one divine sequence. That's what made his reign unshakable. That's what drew nations to his wisdom. That's what placed wealth at his feet, without him ever chasing it. And now that prayer, now that ancient access point, is available to you. So what happens now? You have a choice. You can walk away and let this be just another powerful story you once heard. Or you can take the next step, because this is only the beginning. You've just tasted what was hidden, but in the next revelation, we're going even deeper. There's a spiritual law used by kings, rulers, and prophets that religious systems have tried to erase, a code so potent, so countercultural, that it was labeled as heresy. But those who dared to use it witnessed impossible breakthroughs, and that's exactly what I'm revealing in the next video. They called it heresy. But this code was used by kings to attract wealth, so don't miss it. If this video stirred something inside you, if you feel the pull to go deeper, I want you to do 3 things right now. First, drop a comment below. Type, "I'm ready to activate the code." Or, if you feel bold, type, "I was born to pray like Solomon." These aren't just comments, they're agreements, declarations, echoes into the algorithm of heaven, and they help this video reach more people who are ready, just like you, to walk in alignment with the kingdom. Second, make sure you're subscribed and the notification bell is on, because the next code I reveal might be the one that unlocks your next level. And third, just sit for a moment, breathe, reflect, because this isn't entertainment, this is transformation, and something sacred has just been handed to you. Comment below, "I receive Solomon's codes." Subscribe, turn on the bell, and share this video with 7 people who need to unlock the financial kingdom in their lives. Because this message is meant to reach the chosen ones, and you are a vessel of that light.